Welcome to my diary, beloved. I'm Tatami, and today we are jumping nips deep into the Illuminati situation. And I want to be 100% clear with you. If you do not know what this situation is, this is not the video for you. You need to be all the way caught up. I'm going to be doing things like saying the legal situation, and I'm not going to sit here and explain that. And once upon a time, there was an editor named Danny. We're not doing that here. There's a lot of videos for that content. I think you should go over there, get caught up, do your homework, and then come back here because we're going to be really talking about here is the elements of MLMs and cults that I feel was really prevalent in the background here of Blair's I guess personal and business life that was exposed, and how fascinating it is for me, to see somebody who, I mean, let's be real, came at her videos about MLMs and cults with a very self-uplifting, egotistical type of air, a perfect type of person calling out the non-perfect. One of the reasons why I didn't really like watching her content was I didn't feel like there was enough empathy towards the victims of MLMs. Like, there was almost this air of this accusatory air, as though people join these MLMs to become a predator, when the reality is these people are often desperate. When I go on my Facebook, guaranteed there will be about one person, like one ex-coworker, somebody who posts something for an MLM every other few months. And when I see that, my heart breaks. Like, when I see my ex-coworker and she'll have this spoon and she's just squirting this chocolate goop into it, and she's just it will help you lose weight, and you can tell it doesn't taste good. And you can also be like, there's no way one spoon of anything is going to help somebody lose weight. What's happening here? All I can think is like, oh my gosh, our ex-boss is still not paying you enough to survive, even though you've been working there grinding since you were in your early to mid 20s. And further, your family is struggling, and that breaks my heart. So for me, I just see, like, I see that she's a victim. I see that they're constantly losing money. I see, I have empathy towards it, but I didn't really sense that empathy that I've sensed from other people. I'll link one down below if I can remember her channel name. I want to say it says like Good Girl in it. It's a strange name for somebody who focuses on MLMs and cults and that type of thing. But she gives like the people a voice, which I felt like Illuminati kind of was like on a high horse about these situations, which is what made me uncomfortable, but which is also why I think it's so interesting that she was also kind of applying these techniques in her daily life, whether she noticed or not. I mean, at some point, they have to have noticed, right? At any rate, I do feel I want to give out the disclaimer that this is a little bit different, in my opinion, than the Creepshow situation, because the Creepshow situation started off as like Creepshow was like in a weird relationship with this like drug-addled abuser guy, and that's kind of how they started stalking his ex-girlfriend. Whereas this situation doesn't seem to like, what is the catalyst here? Why were you trying to like run all of these people's lives, and like everybody was getting dirt on everybody, and there was like a villain of the week every other, you know what I mean? What was the reasoning behind that? It doesn't feel as solid as with the Creepshow thing, where I can point and I can be like, oh well, this started out with this like abuser over here, and then when he extended his abuse by using Creepshow. But with this situation, it's a little bit different, in my opinion. I feel like Creepshow's situation is a lot worse, like a lot scarier in a lot of situations, but I do think that Blair was obviously an abuser. She caused somebody to be houseless and penniless, which is just disgusting. Like, the way like I was just so grossed out by that, I can't even explain. If you've been following me, like my struggles with housing and why I am so adamant that like housing is a human right. And when you start weaponizing people's housing, you start making it so that they don't feel like they have a place to even like lay their head at night. I have a real fucking problem with that. And so I think she's a really disgusting piece of work, but I think these people have very different mentalities. Whereas with Creepshow, she was just kind of like manipulating people behind the scenes. With this one, I mean, she was manipulating people to their face. Like, a lot of these people knew, but because like they have dirt on you, but you have dirt on them, people weren't coming forward and saying stuff until everybody was willing to just put the dirty laundry out in the open. So, this all started with the legal eagle call out thing, which I felt like exposed that she was in her own little world, the way that a cult is, you know, the way that when you're in like a cult, you're very detached from what the real world is doing, right? You think you guys are doing stuff that's super normal, and you forget that outside of your bubble, that's not normal. And so that's the type of thing that you can find outside of cults, right? If you go to somebody's house, you realize that they do things differently than your family does, that there's stuff your family does that they'd be like, why would you do it like that? So like there's little ways that we have that in our daily dynamics of life. That's why at first I was like, oh, that's kind of like a thing. But I was like, okay, that's something that can also be applied elsewhere. But one of the things that gave me the red flag was the fact that she wasn't able to see how huge of a faux pas that would be. For most of us, and I'm guessing it's probably because she felt like she was high up there because she has like 1 million plus followers. So for her, she didn't really feel like a normal person calling out a huge creator. She felt like she was this huge creator. She will call out another behemoth, and then her behemoth will take out this behemoth. And it's clear she has to some extent been used to like weaponizing her followers and her fandom to get things done that she wants, to get after people that she wants, which sometimes like happens organically, right? If somebody comes for you, your fans might just go for them, and that's not something you can control. These people are just like, no, we love you and you did nothing wrong and blah blah blah, so they'll come to your defense. But what it showed me here was that there was like things were building in the background to the point where instead of rationalizing it out, or even like stewing on it for like several hours, stewing on it for a day or two, instead they all went and like blew up online. She went and like started like furiously typing. It's like, you know, that manic energy where you're like, oh yeah, we got him. And they unleash all this information, right, that they didn't really mean to do. And that was like the first crack in the dam. Before that, all of this had been really behind scenes. We hadn't really been seeing it. Some people had been calling out, but nobody had really been getting traction for what they'd been calling out, right? She like deleted a bunch of videos off of a channel, blah, blah, blah. But most of us didn't know about that. That stuff had been kind of kept behind the wall. But with this crack, we could see a crack in the facade. We could see a crack in the mask. People were kind of trying to peer into it, like, what is going on here? This doesn't even make sense. And I kept thinking that she was just going to come out and be like, oh, my bad, like, this is just so sometimes you just do something stupid and embarrassing, like, roast me. I mean, that's what I feel like I'd have done. Like, I feel like there's no other choice at that point. Just roast me. Just tell me what it is. But she didn't say anything for a long time. So people were getting even more worked up over that. They're like, why aren't you saying anything? Why aren't you doing anything about this? What the hell are we supposed to be reading into this? So then it comes out that, okay, so she blames the staff, right? When she apologizes, she's like, my big issue, my mistake is that I followed what they said so quickly, so suddenly, right? Which I found really funny. I was like, oh, okay, so it just put it off onto these people. You're still the good guy. That also feels a little bit like culty. It's like when you get caught for something, but you're like, no, that was just that bad apple. That has nothing to, over here is great. We're doing great. There's just somebody over here got a little too excited. And then the staff come out, and basically some of the staff are basically saying that this was like a really stressful culture. There's a really stressful culture of working with her. They were saying that there wasn't a priority of the business. It was more of a priority to police each other, to keep certain people in line. And some people would be like, hey, I really want to create content. I really want to make more out of this. I want to do more. We could be so much more if we all put our heads together and blah, blah, blah. But they were saying that it wasn't a priority, especially of Blair, who seemed to kind of be like, I'm in charge, was putting herself in charge, but she wasn't putting herself in charge. Like, we're going to grind, we're going to become, multi-millionaire, we're going to do it together. It wasn't like that. It was like, there was always some kind of fucking drama. There was some kind of issue. And when somebody started describing that issue of somebody being the villain of the week, every other week there was somebody who had been a real close in the clique, but now suddenly they were actually secretly the enemy this entire time, and we've got to kick them out. We've got to excommunicate them. And when they're gone, we do not talk to them anymore. They are now dead to us. We do not speak of it. They are gone. They are out. Kaput. Who cares how much of a struggle they're having since we kicked them out? Who cares how many eggs they put into this basket that is our little collective? Who the hell cares? They're gone because they were toxic, they were evil, blah blah blah. But then it was another person, then it was another person, and for some reason everybody's like rabidly following along with this. They believe it. You wake up in the morning and Joe's your enemy now. Now Joe's the enemy. Get after Joe. You wake up in the morning, Mary's the enemy. Mary's the enemy. And then one day you wake up and you're the villain. You're the bad guy. And no matter how much you protest, everybody automatically believes it. That's the culture. So now you've been attacked, you've been kicked out, you're penniless, you're missing out on content, you've missed out on this, that, or the third. And you're struggling. When she was talking about, or when they were talking about, she plagiarized, she copied this video, which she tried to say, oh no, I said that I put that video in as like one of my sources. No, she didn't paraphrase from the paper. She didn't even paraphrase from what the guy said. She quoted what the guy who was paraphrasing said verbatim. When somebody says, oh, this bizarre case of da 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 da, and then you reply, you say the bizarre case of da 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 da, you've copied a complete sentence that somebody said that was their unique interpretation of this paperwork. So yeah, she copied entire sentences out of this person's thing because he worded it nicely. Personally, I wouldn't have wanted to reword it either, but I would have said that I was quoting him. I would have said, oh, this person said this, or this, according to so-and-so, blah, 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 blah. And so she did plagiarize, but I feel like that plagiarism is just another indication of how little the business side of all of this actually meant to any of them, or to her especially. The little things like that, who cares, as long as we're keeping up with like this, as long as we can keep up the pretenses and we're putting out content, pumping it out. Who cares if we're always completely correct? Who cares if we come off as like biased sometimes? Who cares if, people are painted a way that they maybe shouldn't have been painted? And I feel like, when you have that many followers, I feel like there's a certain extent where I understand why maybe you would be more comfortable with just releasing content, but at the same time, you still have to keep up a standard, not like a standard of excellence, but a standard of excellence where you make sure, because you realize there are millions of people who you're pumping this content out to, perhaps you should think twice before you say certain things or how you say them, or make sure you're labeling things correctly. But at any rate, I feel like that plagiarism was just another way to show that like the content wasn't the priority. Maybe the money was a priority. Maybe the power was a priority. Maybe the connections were the priority. Maybe it was that little dynamic of a friends group, business friends group that they had behind closed doors. That was the priority, keeping control of that, keeping up with that. But it wasn't the actual content that was being given to all of her subscribers. Okay, so there was also then the issue of her being exposed as a hoarder. Now, this, I understood why this might make somebody see red, right? You wouldn't want somebody to see your shitty living situation. I've lived in places with like mold. I wouldn't want somebody to be like, look, Tatami's like the grossest person on earth because she rented an apartment with a mold problem. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I wouldn't want that to be a reflection of me as an individual, because it sucks. Like, housing is housing. You get in where you fit in, and you do your best wherever you are. However, I understand why at that point somebody might be like, dude, she's a little bit unhinged. She's crazy with us in like personal life. She's nuts in the business sector. Her house that she had me staying in, I didn't even really have a place to stay in. It was hard to like be in there and breathe in there. She moved me from my home, or from where I was, my situation here, and then I was effectively trapped with her in this hoarded home. I can understand why somebody would feel the need to express that, explain it, and maybe even post a picture of it, which is what you expose yourself to if you invite people into your home. And since she effectively left him homeless after making all these promises and helping and all this business connection, I can see why he would be like, look, I gave up a lot and I lost a lot, and then this was the situation I was being trapped in. That's a traumatic ass situation. It's one thing if you decide to live in a hoarded home, you know what I mean? It's another thing if somebody else ends up relying on you financially and gets trapped up in your nasty home, and then they have nothing and they're fleeing your home penniless. That's like a shitty situation. So while I see why she was angry, I also see why these people felt it was very important to express the full scope of what they were dealing with in this situation. Because if I had a hoarded home, I wouldn't be inviting people over. I wouldn't be having people stay over. I wouldn't be having them rely on me for stuff, because I'm not in that place to be doing that. Anyways, so then she decides to do her apology, right? Her apology video, which I personally, I was thinking, how would she go about this? And I was thinking, it's probably going to be about 10 minutes long. I was like, she's going to come out, she's going to apologize to Legal Eagle and his editor. She's going to apologize for her frazzled state of mind. And then she's going to say, like, it's unfortunate how everything played out with the friends group. We all had falling out. We all had a mess. We all like overstepped boundaries, and we're like, it got catty, it got weird, it got, you know, toxic. It was one of the most toxic friends groups. We were being mean girls together. But at the end of the day, I want to like let all that go. So I apologize to everybody who I let down. I'm like, I have my disappointments from when I was let down, but I apologize to everybody. That's what I thought we were going to see. Then I saw that the video was like 45 minutes long, and I was like, whoa, whoa, what do we got here? And essentially what we had there was the first like 5-10 minutes was what I expected. And then it devolved into this like, you know, when like when people are racing and everybody's running and then one person falls and then they like use their arms to scoop and trip everybody else in hopes that like nobody reaches the finish line. That's what it kind of felt like. It felt like, I'm not going to make myself look better, but what I am going to do is make everybody else look worse. Everybody's going to get dragged down to my level. If somebody's got to fail here, somebody's got to lose. And so essentially, I feel like she was trying to maintain control, that control that she'd had behind the scenes all that time. She was trying to maintain it. What I was realizing was that her perception of normal is just so skewed that like all this beef and trauma is happening behind the scenes, and she forgets the rest of us aren't in on it. She forgets the rest of us, that's not a normal way to react. She forgets the rest of us, that's not what anybody would expect to happen. And so we're all looking at it like, oh my gosh, like what have you shown us? But this entire time, that's what we keep seeing. When she slips up and she makes that tweet to Legal, that was her exposing something from behind the wall that she forgot that the rest of us weren't a part of. She's so used to this weird toxic environment where everybody's like circle jerking each other into this like frenzy of like hatred and backstabbing that she forgot that like that's not how people work in the normal world. In the normal world, when you're doing business relationships with somebody, you guys sign your contracts, you do your work, you get it done. When in the normal world, when you're friends with people, you don't have secret files, stuff your friend did wrong. What the fuck? Like I can't even imagine. Like literally, I'm thinking of like my top 3 girlfriends, and I'm like trying to even fathom the mentality wherein I would have information on them to expose them in case our friendships went south. When my friendships go south, I'm just stunned. Like that happened to me like a couple weeks ago. Like I basically only maintained friendship with one of my husband's high school friends because I liked his wife and I was trying to be friends with her, and then like they both turned on us seemingly out of nowhere. Like we didn't have like a falling out or anything, and it was just like startling. It's like, oh my god, like all those times like I've let things go, I've never done anything, like I wouldn't have anything to show anybody. Like all people would have is my word, because I would never just have that kind of information ready and available to expose anybody. The only people I keep information ready to and waiting to expose is my landlord. We're always happy when we move in that first day, but I will take pictures just to be sure, because 100% of the time they lie. 100%. I have yet to meet a landlord that is honest about the state of their apartment when I moved into it. And I've always had the pictures, so I've always been good. You know what I mean? But that's the only time I'm like, oh, you know what would be smart? Let me whip out this phone because I'll always have it. All right. So her trying to expose everybody for the last 40 minutes of her apology video was a gambling move, right? It was a gambling move in order to try to maintain power and control over others. And basically she was trying to, I guess she had paid somebody like $200 to try and go through the tweets. That was also a gambling move, or go through the Discord server maybe to find like the time somebody used the R word or something. Like gambling moves, honey, gambling moves. Because why? Because when you're slipping control, when you've got control over people, yeah, they may cower and do as you say. But when a situation like this where you're losing control, where people from the cult, so many have been excommunicated communicated out of the cult that there's now a whole movement out there of people who are fighting against you, it's a gamble, because people are defecting and people are realizing that they are caught up, and people are seeing a way out to get out of this type of situation, to just step out and not be the bad guy for having been in it so long. Like, now is the time to jump ship. And that's exactly what people were doing. So it came out that she had these fake profiles to be a shit stirrer. It came out that she was, faking, just, I guess, several fake profiles, faking being here, faking being there, asking people to dig stuff up for her. The person had to go back like pretty much a decade, which I think speaks volumes. If you only have to go back to like 2-4 years, yeah, maybe that person's hasn't had a lot of time to change. But if you have to go back to when somebody's in like their early 20s, their teens, and it just shows she was grasping at straws. She didn't have as much as she had. And it was just sad. It's really pathetic. It's like, fuck, what is the homunculus? Is it pride? What's the one that's like, don't look at me, when it's dying, and it's just so pathetic and shriveled, and that ego, it's like it's so pathetic to watch at the very end, but it's still gonna fight and scream till the bitter end. And that's kind of what I felt like we were watching right then. Like when the final thing came out, and she had been trying to say that, like, one of the people, who had, one of her ex-coworkers had been like a pedo defender because he didn't kick somebody out of her Discord thread fast enough. And then that guy was like, pulled up the receipts. He's like, I was asleep, the time zone difference. I was just like, oh my gosh, this is just too much. And you guys know I'm a CSA survivor, so I'm really serious about that type of stuff, but I'm also really serious about using words like pedo and groomer correctly, because when you widen that word out so everybody's a groomer, any gay person who talks about being gay online, or any trans person who talks about being trans online, is suddenly a groomer, that hurts actual victims, because then the real groomers aren't paid attention to, the real abusers aren't paid attention to. So when somebody throws out like, they're a pedo defender, oh, I don't like that, because you're actually actively harming by saying the real pedo is there, and then you're calling random people pedo defenders because people weren't able to like step up and answer their phone in 10 seconds flat. People weren't like, these people aren't being paid to be moderators on these types of things. Like, when people get mad at me for not answering the phone, I'm just like, I cannot physically be available at all hours of the day, even when I volunteer to do stuff, even when I get other people to volunteer to do stuff. It's just not reasonable to expect of people. And so I felt like that was just the nail in the coffin. It was just like, barrier, it's done. Like, once he was just explaining this stuff, and the fact that she exposed somebody's like suicide note, it just got so messy. And it's just, at this point, you just got to realize like, these people weren't friends to her, these were just people she was trying to control. So I'm gonna wrap this up by getting into my final point, which is how easy it is to fall into these types of dynamics, especially when you're not prepared, you're not looking, and when you're in the fucking thick of it. So the reason why I think it's so easy is because as humans, oftentimes we're not ready for those types of confrontations. We're not ready for those types of situations because it's not normal, right? In normal life, people aren't going to ask this type of stuff of you. Of normal life, somebody's going to say, hey, let's do this job. You guys are going to like get together, collab, boom, 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 be done. Boom, it's done. In normal life, people aren't going to, trap you financially, trap you in their house, trap you, making you feel like bad, make you feel like you're a part of this group. They're not going to isolate you from others. They're not going to villainize random people out of the friends group, and then it keeps happening until it happens to you. These types of things truly aren't normal. And the reason why people fall for them is because a lot of time people don't know how to act when they're in a situation like that, when they're in a high pressure situation where they don't know how to react, and they're trying to keep themselves safe. And I think that's a lot of what we had going on here, was people were trying to keep their jobs safe, people were trying to keep their reputation safe, people were trying to keep themselves physically safe, people were trying to keep themselves physically housed, people were trying to keep their bills paid. It just goes on to where people were just getting into this situation, and they were getting into it deeper and deeper, almost without even realizing it. And I think it's so important to see these red flags, these same things that she was talking about in this MLMs, in this in the cults, because she did a lot of the same stuff, right? She talks about how MLMs will trap you financially and make you feel like all you need to do is this one more thing, or you're just not trying hard enough, or you're just not putting in enough effort. They're just not seeing how much you're dedicated to all of this stuff. And that's not how it's supposed to be. You know what I mean? That's just really not how it's supposed to be. You're supposed to be able to do the work, get the pay, be done. It's not supposed to be this whole thing where, you know, you feel so fundamentally trapped. And I understand that, like, when it comes to YouTubers, streaming influencers, that type of thing, it's a little bit different because YouTubers are a little bit more lax. It's kind of like, I'll collab with you, you collab with me, blah 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 blah. But at the same time, maybe because of that laxness, that's why people get kind of sucked into these like predatory groups, and they think they're about to like make a bunch of content and do a bunch of stuff and be revolutionary. But the reality is they end up trapped because they didn't have the proper boundaries. They didn't put their foot down when they felt like maybe they should. They were too scared. They deferred to somebody else's authority. I've had a problem with that before in my life, where I will act like somebody else is in charge, or just assume somebody else is in charge, or assume the person who's in charge knows what the fuck they're doing, and they don't, and it can really mess with you. So I think that this is just a great reminder that, like, those same tactics that you can see from the Huns, from the MLMs, from cults, those same tactics that you'll see in those bigger, wider, more well-known groups can be micro shrunk down to be implemented into a small group, into a small business, into a small family or friend situation. And one, I think it's super important to recognize when that's happening to you. Two, I think it's super important to recognize how important it is to maintain your community outside of those types of things, so that you have somewhere to turn. If whatever you're getting into requires you to cut everybody off in your past, that's probably not a good idea. If you're losing everybody in your past because you're doing something else, it may not be a good idea. I mean, it may, like, who knows, maybe it's like this once in a lifetime chance to get somewhere great, but the odds are pretty slim that that's what it is. And I think that this was just such a great reminder that this type of thing can just happen in a random house somewhere, and it can all be going down and nobody really knows because everybody's too scared to say anything until it all just blows up. And what's so wild is it all blew up from her own doing. You know, it didn't even have to happen like this. It really didn't have to happen like this. If she hadn't said anything about legal, maybe none of this would have happened. If she'd ignored her editors and been like, oh yeah, guys, yeah, we'll talk shit about this amongst ourselves, but not with anybody else, she might have been able to get away with this a lot better. But she didn't. So we're all here and we're all able to discuss it. And I'm going to leave it at that. All right. May your ancestors and spirit guides be with you at every crossroads. And I will see you next time.